Hello, everyone. My name is Caro. I see some new faces here. I work on the data programs team as a TPM, and today I'm here to present the SP Reputation Working Group. So first of all, I'm going to introduce what is the working group, and then the architecture of it, and then we will talk a little bit about the Retrieval bot network that is part of the working group, but only part of it. There's also other stuff. But since we're talking about retrievals in this track, I'm going to focus on the Retrieval bot. And then also how to participate in the working group and the DAOification of it coming up. So that part will be kind of a discussion on the future directions. Also leaving some time for Q&A at the end. Perfect. So the working group, right now we're calling ourselves a working group, but the long-term goal is to make it a DAO. It is the first version of the DAO, and we have currently 15 members in the reputation working group that are collecting data across the ecosystem. Any reputation data around SPs, we love them in the shared database. And currently we're in the V1 stage, and we have completed the milestone to light up, the first iteration and gathered interest in the different bodies in the network that are collecting data. So because we currently don't have the tokenomics in place, that's why we're calling ourselves just a working group at the moment. And we're offering free access to our reputation database. So right now we have a network of on this diagram you can see there are 5 retrieval bots. We have 6 now, actually, as of last week. And so I'll dive into the retrieval bots, but outside of that, we also have the Bedrock team. They have Lassie metrics on retrievals that we're collecting, and we are also getting on-chain data from Filfox, Filscan, as well as ground control, which is the SP location data. And Starboard also has a bunch of amazing metrics they collect. We recently also onboarded ST Fil. They also have data around, SP staking and equity debt ratio. And we are talking with Spark as well to have their data onboarded soon after. So here in the diamonds, those are the data collectors that you see. Ignore the coins for now since we don't have that set up. All these diamonds, data collectors, they're pinging SPs and collecting data, as well as just getting data empirically on how they're doing with retrievals, where they are, and how many blocks they've mined, etc. And we have a shared database on Mongo that these data collectors contribute their data into. And then we're using a relay layer of the database currently on Polybase. We're collaborating with this PLN company, also Web3 database, to serve this data out to anyone who wants to use it. The architecture is built like this so that we have, in the future, we want to just use Polybase, but because they're kind of new, we onboarded that after we have collected the data into MongoDB, so that's why we have this kind of double layer. The future goal is to have reputation services, the stars that you see at the bottom, consume from this database of 100 plus different metrics that we collect. The DAO or the database itself does not make any assumptions on the metrics. It does not give scores, for example, on how is the quality of service of this particular SP. It just gathers all this data so that these reputation services can consume from it and make their own heuristics to figure out what they want to make sense of the data for their own purpose. So in the future, there are a couple ideas, around insurance or financial instruments that can be built on top of or using this database. And anything you can think of, the database is just there to serve as an oracle, so to speak, of how SPs are operating. But yeah, in the future, the idea for the treasury of the DAO is to anyone that needs to read from the database will use their token, the DAO token, native token, and the operators of the DAO, including the data collectors and the people who manage the database, will get paid from the treasury. So let's talk a little bit about the retrieval bot. So these are the 5 you see here on the left, the 5 diamonds. Those are very pertinent to retrievals. Those are a network of different retrieval bots that are currently making 3 million calls a month per retrieval protocol. So there are 3 protocols. There's the HTTP, GraphSync, and BitSwap. So if you add them all together, it's like 9 million a month. And you can see on the diagram, on the graph here, that around 20% currently, the network is retrievable via HTTP. We're kind of pushing for HTTP right now because on a Filecoin deal, there's the piece CID that's recorded, but not necessarily the payload CID. And the best way to test for retrievals is through testing whether a piece is retrievable rather than whether a file or a CID or a payload CID that's retrievable. That's coming up later. Right now, we're testing mostly via HTTP to see if the network is retrievable, and it's at around 20%. And if you zoom in onto the errors that we get, over the 80% that's not retrievable, we're seeing around 50% that's protocol not supported. That means they're not turning on their retrievals. They're not serving retrievals. They're not trying to serve retrievals. The rest of people are trying. They're just having other errors. And so there should be, it's buried on the bottom, a link that you can check out by putting in a storage provider ID or a Fil Plus client address to check the specific retrievability of an address. So I touched on this already. Right now, V1, we're sampling through all 3 protocols, but we're focused on HTTP because that's the most accurate one since we only have the PCID information. For GraphSync and BitSwap at the current moment, we're assuming that the label field of the Filecoin deal consists of the payload CID. If you use Boost, that is automatically there. But some, other providers are not necessarily putting the payload CID in the label field. So the GraphSync and BitSwap can be a little wonky. It's not 100% correct. We are sampling all Filecoin Fil Plus deals, Filecoin Plus deals. Those are the verified deals. And we sample them randomly, but there is a priority. The newer deals will get sampled more robustly and frequently than older deals, just because older deals are expiring soon, and back then the standard wasn't there, and we're not as strict on the older deals. So we are working on a version 2 of the retrieval bots. By the way, I'm talking about one specific retrieval bot. The one instance of retrieval bot already stands up a network of nodes around the world that pings and tries to retrieve data from SP. But there are many different entities running different instances of the retrieval bot. We have one from the Filecoin Foundation, one from Protocol Labs, one from Slingshot, one from Gravity Assist, which is by our partner agency Undone, one from New Web Group. They have an instance in China because sometimes with the Great Firewall things can get a little different. So we have an instance native in China. Let's see what else. So in V2 we are trying to make the GraphSync and BitSwap piece also more robust, and we're using a piece range retrieval to sample a part of the piece itself and get data out. In V1, it's very Boolean, just yes, are they serving retrievals or no, they're not serving retrievals? Are we getting bits back or are we not getting bits back? But in V2, we're actually diving into the piece that we get back and see if that data matches what they're supposed to store. Because we don't want them to just serve us random data and we think, oh, they're serving data and that's fine. Because we want to see that they're actually serving what they promised to store. So piece range retrieval will let us look at a specific window, like a 8 megabyte window in the whole piece, and then brute force trying to find the header of a payload CID, and then try to use GraphSync, BitSwap, also HTTP to get that payload CID to see whether that matches what we know. So, and also we're going to have the whole piece retrieval. This will be very infrequent because it is a large piece. So those are the things we're working on in Q4. So if your service is collecting data around SP reputation, any kind of metrics, we would love for you to participate in the DAO. And if you also want to run an instance of the retrieval bot, we also would love that as well, so that we have a bigger collection of the retrieval bots, and we can make sure that our data is as accurate as possible by eliminating any data outliers, for example. So participating in the working group right now is pretty simple since we don't have the DAO set up. In the future, there will be like a member approval process, but right now, just make sure that you have a provider field that is the Filecoin storage provider address and a date stamp that specifies when this data was collected. We just need these two fields in your payload, in your upload to the database. Anything else you want to add, that is all up to you. And just make sure your payload size is less than 50 megabytes per day. It doesn't matter how frequently you want to upload or how many times you want to upload a day, how big the payload is each time. Just make sure the total upload isn't too big to flood the database. Yes, I see a hand. That's a good question. The question is, are we going to make running a retrieval bot permissionless? It is definitely on the horizon. We don't currently have a plan to execute that yet. Right now, the people that are running, like I mentioned, are in the PLN that we know. We know that they're participating and they've been here for a while. We know who they are. So that's why we trust their data. But if we were to open it up to everybody, we would need to implement this kind of, data authenticity test. I'm not too sure how to do that piece yet. It would have to be kind of, if we admit that data, right, does that mean that anyone can trust that data to be accurate? Or we can kind of like put the responsibility on the data collector and say, okay, as a reputation service, the stars here, the consumers, they can choose to trust Saturn, for example, and they can choose to trust the retrieval bots, but the working group isn't responsible for the data itself. Like there are many ways to go about it. For the retrieval bot network itself, the blue diamonds you see here, that is currently run by trusted parties. So, would love to discuss more about this offline as well. Follow-up question? I mean, finish this thought first.
Sure. So in this picture, you have like the tokens from the data clients going to reputation services. Are these data clients the actual users making storage deals?
These tokens are the native DAO tokens. So if you are consuming from the database, you would pay the token. And if you're providing service, you earn tokens.
Sorry, like specifically, like what does the data client represent? Is that an end user that's making a storage deal, or just like an end user that, like who is interested in, like as an end user, who is interested into paying?
Oh, who is interested in consuming the data? It could be anybody that needs reputation data to build their system. For example, if you want to build a lending service and you want to see how reputable this SP is to determine how much you can lend to them, like you have an incentive to know more about their background and their reputation, right? So that's an example of you wanting to pay for this data.
Yeah, so this is like more likely just like services and less so actual like individual users.
Correct. Yeah, these are reputation services that are building tools to enable end users. That was pretty much it. The future part of DAOification, there are a bunch of work there to figure out the incentives for participation. So right now, we are not really, like Amin said, we're like trusting the participants and trusting their data, but there isn't really like a incentive system or structure built. So we want to figure out the tokenomics to correctly incentivize the participation of the members in the DAO. Why would I contribute data to you, right? What do I get out of that? And also to have this like structure in place for access to data metrics. So that is the piece where you need to provide a token or pay something to get this information out from the database. And also working on some community bylaws. This will be, adding new net members, changing metrics, all these different like changes. How do we address that as a DAO? So this also speaks to do we add a member that we all trust, or can we make it slightly more permissionless and just like, have a approval process of people we might not know to join the DAO. And also the financial sustainability part, where we want the OPEX to be covered by the DAO itself and not have to get grants elsewhere. So hopefully after this tokenomics piece is settled in, we will figure out some way to have the operational costs covered. And that's like the least part. And also we want to like make the DAO token more valuable, right? That is the goal of any DAO. So yeah, that is the talk. Does anyone have any more questions? Yes.